Hi, everyone. Welcome to our amazing presentation today. We're going to be talking about top MBA careers. My name is Jen Turchnell, and I am the CEO of ARINGO MBA admissions team. And so I am excited to speak with everybody. So if you want to post any comments, I am happy to answer your questions as we kind of get started today. While we are waiting for everybody to join, let's start with how many people are applying for MBAs this fall? And you can just add your comments here to the side as we get here. Akash, hi, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Anybody else here today that would like to say hello? All right. Okay, so planning for the future. I love it. So this is a great time to kind of be exploring what careers you can have during your MBA program. So excited to kind of share a bit more. Vincent, yep. Camille, Shreyash, yes. Oh, okay. So super excited that everybody is here. Okay, Vincent, you have a question, hon. Go ahead and ask. All right, round two, perfect. Aman, that's great. Gosh, I haven't seen your question yet. Go ahead and type it in. Excellent. So while you're writing your questions, I'll just kind of talk a little bit about MBA careers, and essentially what's most important is that we're going to be talking about what are potential careers during your MBA program, but then also we'll want to talk about how you want to pitch them in your MBA admissions applications. And so that'll be also important. So when you go to write your application, you want to be able to really show the admissions committee that you know what you're wanting to do and projecting confidence in your future. Okay, Akash, you wanted to know about leaving the civil and do the MBA. So definitely, you can absolutely find a career in the U.S. that is not necessarily in the civil side. What you'll want to do is talk about your transferable skills. So that's something that you could definitely do. And I'll talk about this a little bit during the presentation, but typically when people are going to an MBA, they're looking to transition, and we can talk about transitioning careers from different functions, different sectors, or even different geographies. And a lot of the times people are doing what's called a triple jump, and they're switching all three. So MBAs are very much understanding of people going from one type of career to the next. I think the biggest thing is understanding how that translates and what skills you have that are transferable and will look attractive to MBA admissions recruiters later on. Awesome. Yes. So internships, I think that that's something to kind of explore on a personal level. I think that we can always talk about that offline, and and I'll share my contact information with you guys as we get started and at the end as well. So perfect. Okay, so I think we'll get started here shortly, and then I'll be able to answer some of these questions at the end of the session today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. I'll be answering questions at the end, but I'll try to see if there's any ones that are specifically relevant to the slides that I'm working on or going through at that time and try to answer them. If not, we'll go back to them at the end, okay? All right, so hello everyone. My name is Jen Turchnell. I'm the CEO of ARINGO MBA Admissions Consulting, and I am excited to be here with you today, and we're going to cover top MBA careers. So first I'll tell you a little bit about who we are, and then I'll share about what the top MBA careers are, the roles that you could potentially get within that field, and then the salaries, and then I'll talk about how that goes into your school selection, and we'll open it up for Q&A. So first, I'd like to share a little bit about ARINGO. So we've been around for 20 years, well, just about 20 years. And we started when our founder, Gil Livy, got into Wharton with a 650 GMAT and said, man, there has to be something more to MBA admissions than just your GMAT score. So as you can see, we work on school selection. We help our clients with planning out their strategy for how they're going to apply to the different schools. We have a strategy team that's going to help with the overarching themes that you'll use throughout your entire application to multiple schools. Then we'll help you with your CV, your essays, letters of recommendation, helping coach your recommenders if needed. We'll go through interview preparation, and then we'll also talk about scholarships and waitlist if needed. So those are our services. If you look at ARINGO, we have our statistics on our website. They're all audited, but you'll see in blue is our admissions rates compared to the admission rates of the typical MBA programs. So with that, you can see we've done quite well, and we've kind of learned what the magic is for building an application that's specific to you and to the schools you're most interested in. All right, so we're going to get started with talking about the different careers you could have from an MBA. And I'll tell you that we could do an hour-long presentation on each one of these different sectors or functions, but today it's just going to be a quick overview. I'll be talking about the different roles, and I'll also be sharing some average salaries. Now, please note that these are going to change based on the school, and I'll tell you how to do your research to make sure that you understand the schools that you're most interested in, what those kind of employment prospects look like whenever you're diving into those schools and doing your research. So we're going to get started with one of the biggest employers of MBAs, and that's going to be consulting. So start off that you could go into several different types of consulting, but essentially the umbrella of consulting is usually called management consulting. And so you're helping companies solve problems. And then you could go into a specific type of consulting called strategy consulting, where a company enlists your firm to handle specific topics or problems within their actual company, and they usually will yield action-based strategies, so reorgs, those types of things. That's typically coming from a strategy consultant. Now, the other side of consulting is that you can go into industry-specific consulting. So a lot of people are very interested in impact consulting, technology, human capital or HR, looking at being an internal consultant. So you could be consulting within your own organization. You could do political and economic, healthcare, operations. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so as we talk about that, you can see that the salary range can go from $42,000 a year, and believe it or not, that comes from HBS's recent graduate report, all the way up to $250,000 a year. But on average, you're looking around $150,000 a year. And then when we talk about employers, obviously everybody talks about the big three, your MBB, so McKinsey, Bain and Company, and Boston Consulting Group. But I don't think that you should sleep on some other amazing consulting firms that are also out there. I often talk to clients about potentially adding in a couple of the tier 2 consulting firms as a little bit of a backup plan. So looking at the big 4, KPMG, Accenture, looking at PwC, like those companies can also provide you with strong career outcomes. In fact, like Deloitte has become one of the top ranked consulting firms, and they seem to have fantastic salaries. So even though they're technically not MBB, they could be offering you fantastic salary. And if that's what you're looking for, then that could be a great opportunity for you. So consulting is so big. That world is just astronomical as far as like breaking it down into each different sector. But honestly, consulting, you're helping people solve problems. And if that's something that you're really interested in, this is a great opportunity for you. This is also an opportunity for you to maybe use your expertise that you have in a specific area. So before, someone was talking about coming from the civil side and moving into a career in the US. Well, using your civil service experience, you could act as a consultant for a company that's looking for something specific in that industry sector, or however you can help. Let's see if there's any questions that I can answer immediately. So with human capital consulting, that's really going to be helping companies come up with strategies and essentially reorgs. I feel like that's like the biggest thing that most corporate employees are so afraid of is the consultants are here, there's going to be a reorg. But they're going to help you with either putting talent in the right place or helping you fill a gap that maybe you might have. So a company will say, we're having a really hard time reaching this specific audience. Can you help us with determining what we're missing out on? And so they might tell them, from a marketing standpoint, you need to hire more Gen Z or whatever generation there might be so that you can kind of catch that specific age group in your marketing. Or if you're missing out on customer service, or let's say some of the annual reports show some deficits, they're going to help with that. Or maybe your company is expanding and starting a whole new like manufacturing, or maybe they acquired a manufacturing arm and it's not typically in the wheelhouse. They're going to help with figuring out how to employ folks, how to put them in the right spots, and how to use what you already have to make things work. And then what you need to hire. Okay. So great question about, is it necessary to have an MBA to go into consultant? Absolutely not. So you can read, there's a lot of information out there on the web, but there's definitely entryways into consulting. You don't have to have an MBA. You could have another graduate degree. Absolutely. Looking at a master's in finance. And again, like if you're wanting to look at these industry specific consulting roles, you can look at different master's degrees. Beyond that, you can absolutely go into a consulting role without a master's degree, but it's definitely harder to get into the top tiers of consulting without a master's degree or a high level of expertise in a specific area. So if you've been able to grow solidly in the manufacturing side, let's say that you've grown with Ford and you've gone through the different tiers of leadership, and now you want to move into the consulting side, you can absolutely do that from the consulting side, utilizing this experience and breadth and depth of knowledge with the automotive industry and be able to help other companies with achieving success. So I definitely would certainly look into that if that's something that you're trying to debate on, if you need an MBA or not. So which school should you target if you want to do human capital consulting? So technically I could say specific schools, but honestly, like all MBA programs are going to kind of prepare you for this if there's a specific side of consulting you're interested in. So I might look up, if human capital was something of extreme interest to me, I would look at MBA programs that have specializations in HR or general management that would help you with achieving a career in that specific industry. Okay, so great question about consulting and age. So a lot of the times when we have candidates who are a little bit older, they're kind of worried about the age for applying to an MBA. And honestly, since consulting is one of the primary feeders for jobs in an MBA world, that's where the MBA admissions team will have concerns, right? So if you're pitching that you want to go into consulting, but you're 29, 30, 31, what's going to happen is that you might get passed over for top tier consulting opportunities because you're less likely to want to travel and be working 80 hours a week, 80, 90 hours a week, the older that you get, because typically you're going to start a family. And so consulting firms, whether you specifically are willing to travel or not, kind of have a bit of a generalization about age categories and what they've learned. And then that starts to trickle down to MBA admissions and their ability to get their candidates employed, specifically with one of the biggest sectors for employment at an MBA program. So age does have a little bit to do with it. If you are a little bit older and you're maybe going through a one-year MBA program, you could also consider some of the tier 2, tier 3 consulting firms, as they may not travel as much. Or you could go into industry-specific consulting, where you could lend your expertise, but not necessarily have to travel on a global level the way that you might if you work for an MBB or even tier 2. All right, so we're going to move on to the next kind of major employment sector. So with marketing, a lot of people will go into brand manager, product manager, or marketing analytics. And so across the field, you'll see that there are several different roles that you can have. These are 3 of the most common ones. And you can see below, this is a quick infographic from Darden, and you can see a lot of CPG, FMCG companies are hiring folks with marketing degrees or marketing MBAs for these different roles. Now, when we look at this salary range, again, different schools, different ranges. So each school will be very specific to the pay range will be very specific to each one of these schools that you choose, but it's a good round number for you to kind of think of. So for brand management, 80 to 151K, depending on the brand and location. Product management, 132 to 141. And then marketing analytics, 88 to 117K. Again, looking at the different brands, locations, and different schools. So what does a product manager do? So a product manager is going to be seeing the cycle of the product and how it goes to market, who the key stakeholders are, the market share as far as the different consumers or audiences that you're going to be advertising to. So you're going to manage the entire prospect of that product. Then when it comes to the analytics side, you're going to be doing much more of the analysis of what is offered or what the market is saying about specific products, different achievements within that, as well as where your key indicators are. So so you'll see that this will kind of blend over between marketing, tech, general management. Everything can get a little bit fuzzy between these different roles. And I think a lot of this depends on the school that you go to and the classes and curriculum that you are attending as to how you would pitch your career, whether that's technically marketing or whether that's technology or if it's even general management. So again, each one of these is going to be a little bit different based on the different schools. But this is a good employment survey from Darden specifically. If we look at some other schools, they might have a different list of employers for marketing as well. All right, moving on to the IT and the management of IT systems. So a couple of common roles can be data analyst with around 100K salary, product manager, again, really easy to kind of slide from one sector to the other. And they typically can get around 170K, IT manager, 150K. So again, averages can change per the school and location. And so with that being said, a lot of people want to get into FANG. And when I first heard of this, I was like, what is FANG? And so Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and Microsoft, and now there's all kinds of different acronyms, but I feel like FANG is the most common one that I hear a lot with within the MBA community. And so what I wanted to kind of share on this page is that you don't just have to go for careers in FANG. You can definitely work for plenty of other employers in the IT world, whether that's specifically in an industry. So looking at like consumer goods, Home Depot, automotive with Ford, or you could work for other IT companies that aren't necessarily part of FANG, but do have a large influence. So you can see there's several different companies underneath this umbrella. All right, so next we're going to talk about finance. So finance is a bit complicated because there's two different kind of tracks that I would say you could kind of talk about. So first I'll talk about being kind of in industry. And whenever I use that term, or anybody uses it, it really means working for companies in a role. So finance manager at Ford, finance manager at Google, Amazon, those types of things. So you could be a finance manager, a financial controller, or a financial analyst. So those are three kind of like more of industry roles where you could be working in-house at one of the, at a company, at a bank. And so you could have those roles. Or with finance, you could also move into investment banking, private equity, or asset management. And so that's kind of a completely different tier of employment, but both fall underneath the finance category. So almost anybody who is applying to an MBA, most of the time, the three top career choices that people are making is that I want to be a consultant, I want to go into investment banking or private equity, and then there's a lot of VC as well. So these are the different options or paths that you can go into. A lot of the times, depending on your background, if you're moving into this investment banking, PE, asset management for the first time, you'd be in more like an associate role for 1 to 3 years, and then you'd be able to kind of move up the chain. And with that, the salary kind of moves pretty quickly. So next, we'll talk about operations. So operations, again, one of those fields that people can go into that are pretty general. So you can be an operations manager for any large company or small company. You can work in supply chain, being a planning manager. Every kind of company needs some sort of logistical help. And so if you go into the operations side, there's definitely opportunities within industry for you to be able to be employed with several different companies. If you have a specific niche that you're most interested in, then you can look into those types of companies. So an operations manager is going to be, depending on the company, they're going to be they're going to be working through the company on a large scale. So they're going to be able to see, let's say for Nike. So if you're an operations manager with Nike, you're going to be looking at not only the manufacturing, but also the supply chain, as well as the delivery and product quality QC, and then kind of the life cycle of the client. So there could be several different parts of this, several different managers involved, but essentially you're going to make sure that the product is manufactured, that it meets all the standards. You're working with all of the counterparts across the business in different departments. And then you're going to work with the logistics to ensure that they get to the location they need to, whether that's a warehouse or to a retailer. And then you're going to make sure that they're able to be sold. And so you're going to be looking not only at the product side of things, but also logistically, did everything go successful overall? And so it just depends on the specific industry, but there's a lot of different ways that an operations manager can have a strong influence on a company based on this experience and being able to recognize problems, be able to solve them, and deliver for not only the internal customers, but also the external customers. All right. So then the last category I was going to kind of touch on is management and HR. So this is a huge category, and essentially you could work anywhere with these. Like if you decided this as your specialization. So in general, general management, average salary is 150K, and many of the top MBA programs actually report that their general management specialization students usually receive often the highest salary of the bunch. You can also go to business development. You could be an HR manager or human capital manager, just depending on the terms that the different employers use. But essentially, you can go anywhere with a degree in management. And so I'll say that with any MBA program, you're going to have a general management education. To be honest, like you're going to have a foundational MBA education that's going to teach you about finance, marketing. It'll teach you about supply chain, accounting, all different parts of the business, and put them all together. And then beyond that, you can do additional specializations. So if you wanted to market yourself as general management, you can absolutely do that, even if you have a specialization. That would just maybe determine if you go into tech, if you go into consumer goods, or if you go into beauty. Like the different sectors that are available for you to work in are kind of endless when you apply on a more like general level, as well as business development. Okay. Sorry, I'm just reading some of the comments to see if I can answer anything. So I know that this kind of refers back to the past, but I think that it's also good for now. She had asked about, is operations general enough that your previous work experience would not matter? And I would say that with operations as well as management and HR, those are two different specializations that absolutely are open to anybody from any background that are going to help you get a job post MBA and kind of allow you to, I guess a lot of people say, write your own ticket. So decide what direction you want to go. And I would say that you need to start deciding that early on in your MBA education. So in that first quarter, you guys are going to start taking a lot of classes that are going to help you with kind of deciding which sector is going to be your favorite or what direction you want to go. Recruiters are going to start being on campus. You can start going to their information sessions so you can learn a lot. But essentially, if you're kind of ambiguous about your career goals and you know that you need an MBA, you can mention operations, you can mention management as your career goals, and they likely will easily align with the next level of your career, or the next step in your career. Sam, we will talk about real estate soon. So I think that we can kind of, Sam, your question is really interesting about real estate and infrastructure sector and being able to move into consulting and finance. So I feel like those are a bit specific for this presentation, but happy to chat with you offline about it. I'll share my contact information at the end. I think I've caught most of the questions here. Okay, so, and again, I apologize that some of my scaling on my PowerPoint is a little off, but when we talk about these different career outcomes, how does that affect choosing the right school? And so what I usually tell our clients is that you first want to narrow down your school choice by specialization. So if there's something specific that you're most interested in, if you want to go into finance, if you want to go into tech, you want to make sure that you find the schools that have specializations in those areas. HR is a really great example. So for the most part, there's very few HR specializations within MBA. I think it's because it gets lumped into more like general management. So when we go to pitch your career, we want to use something or a specialization that makes sense for that school. So that's why I would say you should start your school search based on what you want to do after your MBA, and whether that's what you're pitching on your application or what you authentically want to do. That's where I would start. So definitely looking at where you want to be post MBA. This is your investment in your career. So you want to make sure that they have what you're looking for once you graduate, because that will influence the recruitment. So employers are going to go to these schools based on their specializations. So, I mean, it's pretty common knowledge that most people think that Booth, Wharton, Columbia, all are, finance schools. And then Tepper is a huge product/tech school. Then you can look, also Cornell is a huge finance and maybe tech school as well, especially since they have a tech MBA. I would say somewhat similar for NYU. So there's a lot of different school choices out there. But if I went to, it's really hard to say this because my example was going to be if I went to Booth and said that I wanted to work at Amazon, they might say, well, like there's some other top MBA programs out there that are top feeders to Amazon, but then you could talk about the financial angle. But I think that that's the biggest thing is look at the specializations, then look at the schools, look at who is going to be recruiting there as far as employers. And then I'd also start to find geographies that make sense for you. So depending on where you want to work post MBA is where you should be doing your search. While yes, most programs have international placements, they also have even like if we want to get down to like just the US, they do have placements across the US, but I'll tell you that locally is going to be their strongest network for employment. So if you go to the school in the Northeast, it's likely that you're going to be working in the Northeast. So if your goal is to get out to California, look at the California schools. Same thing if you want to work in investment banking. The California schools, while you definitely can get jobs in investment banking from Stanford and Haas, maybe UCLA, there is some connection, but your network is going to be in California. Whereas when you go to work, you want it to be in the Northeast, close to New York. So that's something I would take into consideration. Beyond that, every school has their own personality. So that's where we kind of start talking about school fit. Some schools are really big on community. So when we talk about Tuck, Duke, those are schools that are really all about being Team Fuqua. Or like when we talk about Tuck, their number one quality that they're looking for in a candidate is that they're nice. So those schools have personalities of their own. And you want to be in a school that really embraces who you are. And that you embrace who they are as well. So I would include that into your search, not only the specialization, who's recruiting there, the geography, but also school fit. So this is how we're going from a huge list of schools and narrowing it down to a couple of specific schools that are most important and close to you that you can write really compelling applications for. So next, we will talk about, Priyash, I know that you're asking me about schools for HR. There's not very many that are going to give you that specialization, but if you email me after the presentation, we can kind of talk about that. So the next thing that I want to talk about is how do you put this all together in your application? So when we talk about an admissions committee and what they're looking for in an application is that they want to see that there's a thread in your story from where you've been, how the MBA fits into your short-term and your long-term goals, and how there is a story that weaves throughout. So when we talk about this, maybe you want to talk about civil service. Let's put that into perspective. So I'm coming from the civil service side of things, and maybe even, so I was So I had a job in an NGO and was able to grow throughout. And now I want to move into supply chain. And when I was in my NGO, the thing that I liked the most about that was putting people in the right place and making sure that everything was operating effectively and efficiently using the resources that we had, because they were somewhat scarce, or funding was scarce. So we had to do whatever we could and on an innovative level to make things work. And I really liked that part of my job. So now I want to move into operations and put that into a I want to employ those skills on a more global level. And I want to do that with a consumer products and goods company. So I want to work at P&G and be able to work in operations. And then my long-term goal is that I want to start my own business, and I want to take this passion for nonprofit tied into this, be able to utilize the experience I've had in consumer goods, and then be able to launch my own product line and be able to benefit people or a specific audience. And so there's a string that kind of goes between them, and the admissions committee can say, oh, wow, they have a plan. They have skills that we can use from their past. They can easily tie this together for employers. We have the curriculum to help them get to the next step in their career. And we feel like this is a good match for who we are. So that's definitely kind of what it looks like when you're putting everything together in your application. All right, so I'll move on to kind of the Q&A section. So during this, you can ask me anything about careers, MBAs, whatever. And so I'll first start with Chi. I hope I'm saying that correctly. So 35 with experience in operations and project management in the oil and gas sector, confused between EMBA and full-time MBA. So a lot of your question relies on what kind of experience you're looking for in the MBA. So if you are looking to take your career to the next level, and maybe it's potentially sponsored by your employer, then that's a great way to do an executive MBA. Or maybe you can't afford to do an MBA and miss out on getting paid at the same time to cover the expenses. So that's when I would recommend that you do the executive MBA. A true full-time MBA is not going to be a good option for you, because most traditional 2-year full-time MBA or even 1-year MBAs will feel that you're too senior, you've had too much experience for them, and they're not going to be able to find you the right employment as far as what their typical recruitment looks like as far as employers. So when you are applying and you decide that you want to do full-time as a more seasoned candidate, you can look at programs like Stanford's MSX program. You can look at MIT Sloan Fellows. Foster has a global EMBA program, which is fantastic. USC has an IBEAR program. These are all 1-year full-time MBA programs that are geared towards seasoned professionals that have you step out of the workforce, retool, or advance to be able to get to that next step. And so I'll say that typically more of like the Stanford and MIT route, there's a bit more sponsorship on that side. So if you have a company that's looking to sponsor you throughout that program, those two schools are typically have a pretty good population that are sponsored. If it's something that you're doing on your own, then you can definitely look at some of the other programs, especially when it comes to cost. But if it's really a good fit for you, maybe you even want to explore entrepreneurship, it's a great opportunity. Is a specialization in marketing with entrepreneurship in terms of long-term goals? So I think when we're talking about entrepreneurship and an MBA, it's really important for you to determine what some of your areas for opportunity are. So if you already have a background in operations or in marketing, then you want to use the MBA to fill that gap. Every MBA will essentially have some sort of entrepreneurship specialization at this point. So they're going to help you with getting some additional skills that you need. I think it would also depend on what kind of organization you're looking to build for what your specialization should be when it comes to entrepreneurship. I think that there's no way to kind of give a blanket answer on that one without having a little bit more context. Again, happy to answer questions over email with specific profiles. Okay, so, all right. Aman is 21 with a job offer from Global Bank. I'm confused between MIM, MBA. Do you suggest I work for a few years, get my undergrad? Okay, so a master's in management or a MIM program is for fresh graduates, people with maybe 0 to 2 years of work experience. They're going to give you a foundational understanding of business so that you can quickly move into more of a management level role. So there's always a debate for candidates between the two. So I think the biggest thing is the job offer that you have now. What level are they going to bring you in at? And how quickly can you move up in the company? If it's going to take you 5 to 6 years, that could be a bit long. And so you could easily get the master's in management and then move into a management role. Or depending on your long-term goal, if you're wanting to move from banking into more of the finance world, investment banking, PE, like those types of things, I would say go into the role and then wait, get the MBA. When you have the resources and knowledge of the industry, then your MBA will have much more of an impact and connection and networking for you to be able to move into that larger or higher tier career. Okay, so Moran wants to know about how to build a strong profile besides a GMAT score. So I think for MBA admissions committees, they are looking for a compelling story to understand who you are. So it's important that you share your academic aptitude. And so whether that's just the GMAT score, in addition, it would also be your bachelor's or master's degree and your GPA. It would be, they would be looking for work experience. And so one, are you qualified for the MBA? And so what they're looking for in this kind of section is, do you have enough exposure to business to be able to understand the curriculum and to contribute to the classroom? So they're looking, that's why most of them have about 4 to 5 years of average years of work experience once you get into the program. The next thing that they're going to be looking for is employability. So do you have a background plus the MBA that would make you a good fit for what you're projecting as your short-term and your long-term goals? And so you would be able to do that through building the story in your essays. The next thing that they're going to be looking for is school fit. So they want to make sure that you're a good fit for their program. How you're going to show them that is by making sure that they see that you've done your homework. So they want to see that you've talked to other students, you've attended events, alumni, and you're going to take those conversations and build them into your essays and say, in speaking with Raj, I was able to hear about the Net Impact Group and how that community really cemented his work or employment post-MBA. And that's something that I'm looking forward to as well. So that's what they're looking for in a good application. Okay. Okay, so when we talk about MBAs and their perspective of post-MBA employment, Sam asks about, should you pitch a sector or a job that typically doesn't sponsor visas? And so, great question. I think that there's a couple of things that play there. what I would recommend if you want to pitch that career is that you pitch a fallback plan or a plan B of returning to the market that you're already in and being able to make an impact there. What we want to do in an MBA application is mitigate any risk that they may have. And so if employment is going to be a question, specifically with sponsorship, you could always be applying for MBAs with STEM certification so that you have essentially 3 years or 36 months to work in the US, and be able to kind of pitch that. And then their idea is that if you're able to secure a role post MBA, that within those 3 years, you can decide if you want to stay in the US and secure your own role, or if you want to move into back to your home country, or if you want to move to a new country. I don't think that it's going to be a complete deficit to your application to pitch it. I think what you need to do is maybe make sure that your long-term goal aligns with that so that you can kind of show them that you're aware that in real estate, you really have to make that impact in that first 3 years to be able to decide on what your long-term career goal would be. I'm 22 with 2.5 years of work experience in operations at one of the top banks. I am not sure about my specialization. How would a general MBA fit? So, Shweta, I think that you have an interesting perspective that you could go so many different ways. So you could go the finance route, you could go the operations route, or general management. I would say you obviously could do that, but I don't think it's going to help you with moving the marker as far as you personally and what you want to do after the MBA. I mean, you're already doing something that's almost general, but I would say that my pitch would be to go either one of those directions. Is that I've really enjoyed my experience within the banking for within operations, and I want to take this to another level and work in operations on a global level or an MNC within CPG or FMCG, within consumer goods. And then if not, you can also talk about that you really enjoyed the operations side of finance and that you're ready to move into finance fully and make that pivot. Either one of those directions, you have a strong thread, that I like to call it, between your past and your future. And so I think that that's definitely the way to go. General management would probably be too general, and I don't know what you're wanting to do post MBA, but I think that operations or finance could be a good option for you. Okay. All right. So I don't see any new questions. Does anybody have a question that maybe I haven't answered, that I can answer for you, that maybe I missed before? Because I can't really scroll up. All right. So while we wait for some final questions, my email address is here. I'm happy to have a session with anybody who attended the event today or that didn't get to attend the live session. Beyond that, I also can send you a link to do a personal one-on-one session as well via my calendar. So I'll send that to you. And then also just know that anybody who's a member of GMAT Club also gets a 15% discount with ARINGO and our services. All right. So next, I am an engineer with 2.5 years of work experience in ITSM and at a fintech, and so Vidi, I am not 100% sure what you should pitch. I think a lot of that's going to depend on what you want to do post MBA. You could definitely go the IT route that you want to continue working in tech, or you can go and be a manager within the tech sector. You can go fintech specifically and then talk about moving up in this niche sector, or you could even talk about being able to move to finance. So you have 3 different options for how you can kind of direct your career. as it relates to an MBA. If you really want to go into something completely different, that might be a little bit harder, but I think that you have a lot of different options there. So the difference between a 1-year and a 2-year MBA typically is the internship. So a lot of the times US MBAs or top ranked MBAs in the US are going to have 2 years with an internship in the middle. Most of the European schools are going to be 1 year without an internship. And so if you are moving from one sector to another, that might be a little bit easier. What I would say is if you felt like your career transition requires a little bit more experience, then the 2-year MBA could be a great option for you to get that internship experience for you to be able to get employment post MBA. If the school is well known, like for consulting, like INSEAD, I mean, if you get admitted in INSEAD, essentially they're thinking that you can easily go into consulting or tech. So with that in mind, you can easily make that transition based on your background. Yeah. So, and then I think the other part of 1-year versus 2-year MBA is to think about years of work experience. So if you have the higher end of years of work experience, then a 1-year MBA might be a little bit more easy for you because you'll quickly get back into the workforce compared to if you took 2 years out. AJ, you can connect with me through email. My email address is jennifert@aringo.com. It's on the screen right now. And I'm on 29, male engineer, wanting to move from analytics to finance and apply in round 2. No. So the great thing about your background, Aman, is that you have a background in quant, right? So I think that that will help you make this leap from analytics to finance, is the fact that you have a strong quant background. So the numbers won't be a problem, or the any sort of the formulas or understanding how things work will not be a problem for you. So you're just going to have to learn the new sector, and that can be easily done through the MBA program. The curriculum will be strong enough to help you with that next step. And then when you're pitching yourself to employers, you're going to be relying on your strong quant background in analytics to be able to move into finance, into this role, because when you were in analytics, you were able to read the numbers, forecast, and make your own analysis. And you maybe at one point in time were delivering them to a board, but now you're delivering them to a consumer or an investor or whoever that might be. So I don't think that you're going to have a hard time moving from analytics to finance. So you work for the government of India in the finance department and want to pivot into consulting. So, what school will be best for you? So I think that that's a much broader question than we can answer just right here. But the top schools for finance typically are, if we're talking about the US, are going to be Booth, Wharton, Columbia, Cornell. You could even consider Tuck and NYU. And then when we talk about Europe, you're going to be going more towards LBS and Oxford. Okay. Okay, awesome. So you were saying that you don't necessarily want to go into finance. That's totally fine. I think that that would be an easy career projection for you as far as what you're sharing with the admissions committee, that it could be a backup plan. And then if you just want to go into general management consulting, any of the top MBA programs are going to be a great feeder into any of the management consulting firms. If there's something specific like impact investing, you could look at schools that are impact consulting. There's definitely schools that you can look at that have more of that social impact slant, whether that's Stanford, Yale, Haas, that have that slant that could be a little bit better of a fit for you as well. So AJ, if the profile of the companies I want to work for is not, if you're not sure of what that profile is, how do you shortlist schools? So then I would go by what function you're looking to do. And AJ, I'm sorry, I wish that I could remember what your background is in, but I don't. So depending on what kind of function you're wanting to do, whether that's finance or whether it's operations or supply chain, whatever it might be, look at schools that have those top specializations, and then you can start exploring the different functions that you can have. So what you will perform or how you will be as far as what job you will perform. And then from there, you can find what top companies that specific school typically has recruiting for those sectors. All right, so I'm going to take, I think, one more question. So City, you said that you recently started off your career in data analytics with 1 year of experience and thinking of applying for an MBA in 2024, but not sure. So I think that it's okay to start looking at MBA programs now, but MBA programs are going to generally want 3 years of work experience at time of application. And when we talk about top MBAs, 3 years is going to be the minimum. There's definitely MBAs that will take less years of work experience, but for the most part, we're going to be looking at that. And then when we move over to European schools, they might be looking for a little bit more of work experience, especially since there won't be an internship. All right, so I know that I shared a lot today, and we kind of talked about a lot of different things. I would love to chat with you guys offline. You can see my email on here on the screen. Feel free to email me, and that's Jennifer with 1 N. And I'm happy to meet with you guys and kind of chat individually. Beyond that, I hope you have a great day, good evening, and a good weekend. Thank you.